Hi, welcome to Season 3, Episode 8 of The Weekly Wave. I'm Matthew Lyons.
And I'm Aaron Johnson.
And our special guest here today is the town manager of Abington, Mr. Scott Lambiace. How are you?
Good, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. We've been trying to get you on the show for
know.
months at this point, and you've always agreed, and something has gone wrong, but we finally got you here.
And no less on Groundhog Day, so.
So you'll never
saw
leave.
my shadow.
So to start off, for those who don't know, what are the responsibilities of a town manager?
So it varies from town to town, actually, and some towns have town managers, some towns have town administrators, some might have a similar position called executive secretary. But in the town of Abington, it's spelled out in the town charter what the responsibilities of the town manager are. And so basically I'm your chief operating officer, chief financial officer. I put together the budget, the operating budget for the town. I take care of all personnel issues, the hiring, appointment. I appoint the police chief, the fire chief, all the department heads. Any contractual matters, disciplinary matters that might arise from that, go through my office. And I report directly to the Board of Selectmen. The selectmen are the elected officials that sort of, they sort of dictate what they would like to see the big picture of what they want the town to become and what we would like to do. And that sort of comes down to me. It's sort of a board of directors coming down and saying, this is what we want from our organization, and we expect you to get us there somehow.
Yeah. And also on top of that, you have your own show. I want you to tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, and with Abington Cable and Kevin and the gang, a show called Town Manager's Corner, and really the idea of that was to go out and visit with the different department heads in the different departments, because not everybody knows what the organizational makeup of the town. There's a public safety section. There's a public works section. There's public health. We have treasurer collector. We have an accounting department. So there's all these other all these different things that are going on in town. So I thought it was nice to be able to go and visit with these different department heads and to say, hey, what's going on? What do you do? What do you do for the town? Tell us about yourself. And like yourselves, I mean, very much you try to get topical and what's going on around us today. And one of the big things is obviously the pandemic. So it's, hey, how's that affecting your department, and how's that affecting how you go about doing business?
Right. It's weird to think because Abington is seen as like a relatively small town, but there's still so many different sections that go into every decision that's made. It's crazy to think about. Going off what you said about the pandemic, I'm going to ask you the same question. How has your job changed since the start of the pandemic?
Well, I walked in on the pandemic, so it was kind of interesting. The opportunity came up, and I want to say I started in May, and I basically, I think the decision had been made to shut town hall probably 2 weeks or so before I got here. So it was very different to walk into what was essentially an empty building. The department heads were all sort of working remotely and getting their stuff done, but it was very decentralized and very difficult to sort of those first couple weeks. So it was a big adjustment. Gradually, as they came back, and we opened up pretty early on, we got everybody back in the building, and we figured out what we needed to do, much like yourselves, with putting up protective screens, wearing masks, checking temperatures, whitewashing hands, and we found that there was a way that we could all be in the building and work together. And so once we began doing that, and we got to meet and collaborate and talk and get to know each other, things worked a lot smoother.
Yeah. And meeting all those different department heads must have been hard. How many department heads did you meet?
Well, we have, I don't know, there's probably half a dozen or a dozen. I mean, we have as you said, the ones you obviously know of, the police chief and the fire chief. We have a DPW director, and under him there's actually a couple of different divisions, and we have an accountant who I made the assistant town manager also, so she has multiple functions. But We have a treasurer collector who, collects the money for the town. And, we have an assessor, a town assessor who goes out and values the property so we know how much tax to charge on the properties. We have a building commissioner whose responsibility is to go out and make sure that, buildings like this are safe at all times. And at the same time, you make sure that new buildings as they're going up are properly permitted. We have a water department. We have probably one of the busiest men in town hall is our public health director. And I'm not sure if he's been on your show yet, but, Marty Golightly is probably one of the busiest men in the world these days between, having to enforce COVID regulations. But at the same time, he's been sort of a leader on the South Shore in setting up the vaccine sites and sort of the, collaborating with the fire chief, John Nuttall, to sort of come up with a way to make it safe and get people in and vaccinate them as much as possible.
Yeah, I hear his name at least I want to say once a day.
He is the most popular guy. Yes. And sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way.
I've been afraid to ask him because he's so busy.
I know.
He's doing important stuff. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Hey, you wanna come
No,
on?
but you know what? A lot of what he does and a lot of what he needs to do is get information out.
Yeah.
And he does it in a very good way. But it's letting people know that we're here, we're on it. We're doing everything we can to, operate safely and keep everybody safe, and eventually get them vaccinated. And as fast as the state and the feds can get supply to us, Marty's getting it out there and getting it into people. So, it is a lot, but I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you at some point. Maybe when it settles. Maybe this
Yeah.
spring.
So when did you decide you wanted to be the town manager? Was this always a lifelong dream, or one day did you just kind of see the
I don't
opportunity?
know, it was probably 15, 16 years ago. I actually, I owned a construction company. I did a lot of, actually it's more than that now, but I did commercial construction and residential construction. And I decided I wanted to, I was tired of chasing the projects, chasing the money, and I wanted to go in to become a building inspector, municipal building inspector. So I saw an ad at the town of Duxbury, and they were looking for a municipal building inspector. And I answered the ad, and I walked in, and I looked and talked to the town manager, and I said, that job actually looks even better than this one. So I worked over the years to sort of make my way up through the town hall, and my responsibilities grew, and I learned and did what I had to do. But it was always my goal at probably after 5 years in there to eventually become a town manager.
What would you say is the highlight of your job?
The highlight?
Yeah.
Well, it takes time. The highlight is what happens over time. So I could see the effect I had on the community of Duxbury over a period of years. There was projects that really touched people or affected people. Community housing was a big thing, and affordable housing, and getting those kind of projects done. Development of areas that had been neglected, and seeing them turn around and get developed in a responsible way. That was pretty exciting. So stuff like that. And then there's always challenges. Even the challenges that we have here right now. You just had 4 lanes of highway open up going right through the middle of town. That'll bring an interesting dynamic to how that stretch of roadway gets developed over the next 5 to 10 years. So we want to make sure that it's done in a responsible way that doesn't have a bad effect on the community, but also provide services and goods and things that we do need for the community, whether it's jobs or revenue or services that people want to use.
So what are some of your plans for the future of Abington? What is on your list to get done to make this town better?
Well, it seems like since I got here, it seems town meeting after town meeting. But for the most part, it's organizationally, I want to bring in, some policies, some best management practices, and institute those, which we're working on. So there's different things within the organization. Things externally that you would see would be community housing. I know there's a big need for senior housing. One of the big things that we pushed through at the last town meeting was developing or forming an affordable housing trust. And that's actually a group of people, these trustees, that will have the ability to institute these projects, whether they might partner with a developer that will put up senior housing, or it might be just affordable housing, or it might be market rate housing that has senior and affordable components to it. But that's one big thing that I know that the community was looking for. I'd like to work with some towns to regionalize some of our operations. The planning, the town doesn't have what's called a town planner. Town planner is an important position because they sort of look at what the long-term idea, what the long-term focus of your town is. What are you hoping to preserve? What are you hoping to develop? How do you want your development to go? How do you make sure it's responsible development? Like I said, on that Route 18 corridor, just to make sure that you don't overbuild or overtax the infrastructure or the assets that we do have. So what I've been meeting with is other towns to see if they also would like to collaborate with me, and we could all have sort of a joint planner that would look at the big picture of the whole area. It becomes more affordable, and then it also takes in everybody's considerations rather than sort of just one town, because that's also going to affect Rockland, it's going to affect Whitman.
Yeah.
It's so that's a big thing that I'd like to work on.
Yeah. And by affordable housing, I would want a little bit more specification. Does that mean more like condos, more apartments, or does that mean like specific neighborhoods with?
Typically, so development, it depends. Usually a developer will put in it could be condos.
Yeah.
And it depends. At certain areas, like you'll see over in Weymouth, the large developments, or even here near the train station, where that's more of a desirable element to have, will be a condominium structure where with multiple units and shared services and parking and whatever, and they can walk to the train station. And it's very attractive to people who want to commute. And now within that number of units, there'll be a certain percentage of them that would be considered affordable units. So a developer isn't going to make them all affordable units. He's going to make some that he can get the most money he can for them.
Yeah.
And then the trade-off would be some of them would be regulated. And some, like we said, you would ask sometimes for maybe a senior housing component to it, because that the population is aging, and we have to keep that in mind, and we have to make sure that we're providing housing for them. We don't want them to have to leave the community because they can't afford to stay here.
Hmm.
Thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure to finally get you down
Yeah,
here.
it was great.
Ask those hard questions. I feel like my generation, we don't really know too much about the responsibilities of town government, and we've really kind of, at least Matt and I, we made an emphasis to kind of get to know our town government officials and get to know you and know what you do. So thank you so much for coming on and kind of letting us know what you do.
No, thank you, and I'm glad you did, and I encourage, at least in better days, I hope everybody does, within your generation, take a hard look at town government, because that's where it all starts, and the impact and the effect that you can have. If you look at how we operate, it's it just blossoms. The town, the state, and the federal government all sort of work on that same notion. We're service providers, and we're providing safety, we're providing roads, we're providing education, and in order to provide that, we tax. So that's it in a nutshell. But as individuals, we all get to vote on those decisions if we want to participate. So that's the whole thing, is letting everybody know that there is a way to participate, there's a way to learn about it. Show up at a town meeting. The next one might be a little difficult because we'll still be under pandemic, but after that, it's open town meeting, and everybody should come and everybody should watch and learn and participate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a great time.
Thanks for watching, and tune in next week for a brand new episode of The Weekly Wave.
And make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at The Weekly Wave and The Green Wave Gazette.
Stay safe.
Goodbye, everybody.